Updated November 26, 2018, 9 hours 2 minutes and 16 seconds. A new board that aims to strengthen grassroots football, with the ultimate goal of achieving a Tasmanian team, has received widespread support from the football community, but one veteran sports journalist has warned it must not fail, and if the code dies in Tasmania, it can die anywhere. Established by the state government, the Football Tasmania board will unite football bodies across the state with a plan to create one voice for Tasmanian football. The board will transition from the Tasmanian Football Council and will include representatives from state government, AFL Tasmania, various local leagues and the Tasmanian State League. Tasmania's hopes were dashed again this year after AFL Chief Executive Gillan McLachlan said there would be no standalone team in the near future and the state needed to work on building a base. It is hoped this new board will alleviate concerns around the future of the state's league and diminishing talent pathways. AFL Tasmania's Chief Executive Tricia Squires welcomed the move and said the focus on community football was important. "We need to ensure that we continue to grow our base in football across the state because that is what's important to make sure our game grows," she said. "The more that we can do to ensure we have a healthy footy community, the better chance we have that if the AFL men's competition was to expand, that Tasmania would be ready." Activity, not speculation or reports. Glenorchy Club President John McCann described the decision to bring all the football bodies together as a fantastic initiative. "I think the fact that there is potentially a single voice focused on outcomes for the Tasmanian football community is a great thing," he said. "For far too long it's been thrown up as a bit of a furphy that the Tasmanian football community is divided in parochial, but I think the fact is we all agree on the core tenets on why this board is being proposed. We need to work hard to make sure that the base is grown. There are strong participation levels in the state and this wonderful game is not lost to the state, and that long term, we'd all like to see the opportunity for Tasmania to have a team in the AFL." Mr. McCann was involved in early discussions about the board and is tentatively hopeful it will fulfill its raison d'etre. "I think the Tasmanian football public has been calling out for a unified voice for decades and I don't think it's that hard to achieve," he said. "This is certainly a very positive step that a lot of people are suggesting should have been taken a long time ago, and obviously we hope to see positive outcomes. The outcomes we want to see are activity, not more speculation, not more reports." But state opposition leader Rebecca White criticized the move to create yet another board. "It's an interesting move from a government that came to office saying that it was going to cut the number of boards and committees. I think this is the second board they've now established to look at setting up a Tassie AFL team," she said. "Of course we want to see a Tassie AFL team, but I don't know whether this board is the best way to achieve it." Sports journalist Martin Flanagan said anything which supports grassroots football is good. What the AFL doesn't acknowledge is that if the game dies at grassroots level, it will die. It's a world-class game played by a tiny fraction of the world's population. It has only ever flourished in a few places, one of which is Tasmania. If it dies in Tasmania, it can die anywhere. Team must pay the bills. The second roadblock to a Tasmanian team has always been the cost. Hawthorn President Jeff Kennett has said a standalone team was not financially viable for the state. "It's a lovely dream, but I don't think it will be competitive or have sufficient support financially for a long enough period for it to be sustainable, unless like the Gold Coast or GWS, the AFL decide to put in $25 million a year," Mr. Kennett was reported saying by AFL.com.au. But independent economist Saul Lake disagreed, and said to compare the Tasmanian situation to Victorian heavyweight teams was a mistake. "I don't think Tasmania should necessarily take as a benchmark for what it costs to put a team on the ground, the biggest spending teams such as Collingwood, West Coast or Hawthorn. Other clubs are able to put teams in the competition and do reasonably well on lower amounts than those three clubs." Mr. Eslake was part of a Tasmanian government AFL steering committee in 2008, which investigated the potential for a Tasmanian team. The work showed that a Tasmanian team would be financially viable on its own with not much more support from the state government than it was then getting, without the need for corrupting the drafts or quite as large support from the AFL as for example Greater Western Sydney are getting. I believe on balance, Tasmania having its own team in the AFL is something that the state can afford. Topics: Australian Football League, Tasmania, Hobart 7000. First posted November 26, 2018, 6 hours 44 minutes and 8 seconds.